Just as I think this paradigm shift in neuroscience and change is a threat, becomes we have to adapt now differently. And boy, as much as there's resistance to change, it's because we don't know how to cooperate. And I think we're learning how to cooperate to help change happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what we call resistance is really the brain's the threat to what would be the raison d'etre if all of a sudden people could heal themselves with natural nutraceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals.
Welcome to Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada, where we explore the deep connections between the brain, the body, and what it really takes to build lasting mental wellness. I am your host, Simon Brazier, and today's conversation goes straight to the heart of why so many people feel stuck despite insight, effort, and even years of therapy. Our guest is Brian DesRoches. He's a PhD and experimental focused psychotherapist, coach, consultant, and author with over 3 decades of clinical experience. Brian's work sits at the intersection of modern neuroscience and real-world transformation. He has trained extensively in EMDR, brain spotting, internal family systems, coherence therapy, and his insights challenge many of the assumptions we've held about emotional healing. He is the author of the newly released Living a Trigger-Free Life, where he explores how deeply rooted emotional patterns are formed, why willpower often fails, and most importantly, how the brain can actually update and release old emotional learnings that no longer serve us. In this episode, we're going to be unpacking why your brain resists change even when you want it, how emotional memories formed decades ago still shape your reactions today, what neuroscience tells us about moving beyond symptom management, and how emotional resilience depends not only on psychology, but also on the brain's biological readiness to change. This is a conversation about understanding your brain, working with its protective systems, and creating the conditions for real lasting change. Today's topic is when the brain is ready to heal, biology meets emotional change. Enjoy the show. Hi, Brian. Welcome to Truehope Cast. How are you? What's going well?
I'm well. Good morning. Good morning. My golf game's going well. The week is going well, and I just look forward to our experience together. I really do.
Wonderful. Yeah, the golf time in Kamloops, where I live, is almost upon us, and my wife can't wait because all I talk about is golf. So,
my wife, in fact, left with my son just now, and they're out doing 18.
Oh, the dream. Let's not talk about that. Let's move on. I'm just going to get jealous.
Yeah.
So we're going to be discussing when the brain is ready to heal, biology meets emotional change today. But before we jump into that heavy topic, would you mind telling us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah. Yes. Name Brian DesRoches. Yes. Let me show you what I do. Been in private practice, coaching and psychotherapy for about 35, 40 years. Done a lot of work on my own. And one of the things that I've always been interested in terms of my practice is change only happens when we change the brain. So, and for at least the whole last century, the only way we could change the brain, we didn't really change it. We just provide alternatives for people to focus on, kind of a counteractive model. So for the past 11 years, I've been really focusing on how we really make true deep change in working with my clients and synaptic change. And finally, and the reason is the neuroscience is out there. Professionally, I love what I do. I am a former Canadian, as I mentioned, and I love that about myself and my history. Live in Seattle, 2 adult children, enjoy good food, good friends, good golf when I can golf good. And the opportunity, once again, just to talk with you and to talk about my book. I'm really, and the whole process of how do we really create enduring transformation. I will tell you, I did 17 years of personal psychotherapy myself, trying all kinds of different models and motifs and and everything. And although I got insight and a lot of understanding into the issues and challenges in my life, and although I knew how to create relief for myself when I was activated and reactive, nothing really changed until I really became aware of the neuroscience of memory reconsolidation and emotional healing at that deep level. That paradigm shift for me changed everything.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that intro. I'd love to jump in straight away into the brain and how we learn, and actually talk about self-defeating behaviors, which I think is a big challenge for a lot of people when they're looking to change those subconscious patterns, those programs that we've been hitting hard for many, many years, come in, they take over. Body doesn't like change. People don't like change. But there are ways in which we can do that. So like you often say, and through your work, looking through your website, that self-defeating behaviors aren't flaws, but they're protections. Yes. So how does the brain learn these protective emotional patterns, and why do they operate completely kind of outside of our conscious awareness?
Oh, that's a great question. First of all, most of us are familiar with learning skills. How do we use a computer, swing a golf club, use a fork, drive a car? And we kind of learn those skills, and they become what is called implicit memory. When I get in my car, I don't have to take out the manual and turn on the ignition. I know how to do that. I know how to use a fork. I know how to do things in life procedurally. Those are implicit. I don't have to, after we practice enough, we just know it. And the second level of learning, Simon, is knowledge processes, how to program something, how to write a book, something, how to do anything. We learn processes, knowledge, history, all of these things that we learn. There is a third level of learning that very few of us know about called emotional learning. And that is the emotional brain learns to associate experiences with emotions. But that learning happens below our conscious awareness. We're not aware that the emotional brain is learning. If I want to go out and learn how to plant flowers, plant my garden better, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to do research, I'm doing that kind of thing. It's very intentional. Emotional learning is unintentional and usually happens in the first 7 years of life, and also up to about 15 or 16, but it can happen after that too. Because it's learning, what happens is if I learn that asking for what I want or accepting compliments or expressing myself results in suffering or pain, then my emotional brain learns that, but I don't know it. So let's just imagine that I'm in a business meeting and I want to contribute my knowledge and experience. And I know I can really help. And I mean, this is a true example from my own experience. But when I go to say something inside of me, my body gets anxious. It tightens up. I get blocked. Now, people call that self-sabotage. I'm sabotaging myself. I'm getting in my own way. Right. But what's happening is, if I learn that expressing myself, giving up my thoughts with a group of people that are important to me will cause pain because that's what happened in my childhood. No blame, it's just what happened. Then my brain takes in that information and it predicts. The brain is a predictive mechanism. It learns, it predicts, it adapts. The brain then predicts suffering based on what it recognizes I want to do. It will then generate anxiety, the threat signal, and then it will generate a protective mechanism, withdrawal, avoidance, conflict, criticism, even depression, even an exogenous, which is a depression that happens because of outside events, not an internal endogenous depression, can then be the way that my brain, not me, the way that my brain is protecting me. And those protective mechanisms, there's three basic sets: the push away, the withdrawal from, and the complete avoidance of anything. If you look at any of our problems and symptoms that people are dealing with in our lives, it'll fall in those three categories. Those are not character flaws, as I say in the book and on my website. They're not. They're the brain's way of automatically protecting you from suffering that it learned will happen because it happened a long time ago. But it's not happening now.
Yeah.
But Simon, it feels like it's real right now. That's the thing that's so interesting about this and makes it, I think, very challenging for us, because nobody's going to reject me if I contribute my knowledge in a meeting, but it feels like I will be rejected. And that feeling is much stronger than that thought. And so I will withdraw. I will self-sabotage. I'll get in my own. I've got hundreds and hundreds of stories and examples, including my own, of how the brain's protective mechanisms are the problems and symptoms we're all trying to resolve. And it's all caused by unconscious or implicit emotional learnings.
Yeah, I think many people, when they sit down, they understand their patterns intellectually, but
Right.
they still can't change them. So from like a neuroscience perspective, why is insight alone so rarely enough to produce those lasting emotional changes that a lot of people want to have but just can't get through it?
Boy, that was my experience for so many years. Yeah, I know, because my dad was a PTSD World War II veteran who suffered from alcoholism. I know I carry around this anxiety that something bad's going to happen, or I'm going to be shamed because of that. And I had awareness. I knew it. I knew that I had this imposter syndrome. I knew it, but I couldn't change it, Simon. I couldn't change it. And the reason is in fact, knowing it added to my frustration. What's wrong with me? How come I can't speak my piece, be clear? I have a lot of examples. What happens is insight is a mental awareness, right? Oh, I know this. But the change that has to happen is not in the neocortex, the thinking brain. It's in the emotional brain.
Yeah.
And until that happens, the cause of my problems will continue to exist. Now, what's interesting is about 15, 18 years ago, neuroscience discovered what before was thought to be impossible. We can update the emotional, we can update the learnings. We can actually change at the synaptic level if we become aware of what the threat is. And there's a very clear protocol, and it is like what I call human technology. It's a highly predictable outcome because we're changing at the synaptic level. So insight, I get it. Understanding, very important. Change does not create enduring transformation at all. I wish it did, but it doesn't. The new neuroscience does, Simon. The new neuroscience does.
I had a great podcast episode. I'm not going to ruin it for people, but of who I spoke to. But we talk about the lack of like emotional development, especially within men, what they have, and how kind of in our culture we don't really particularly have a strong sense of helping educate young kids and how to emotionally develop effectively into adulthood. And we talked about all sorts of things, but one thing that kind of stood out for me was that within daycares and the first years of school, most teachers and most of that adult presence is female. And
Yes.
women have, not typically women will have a different response to men when it comes to developing kids, and especially with young boys. Young boys we're looking to control their emotions, and we just had this interesting conversation about the underdeveloped emotional range that adult boys end up having. And that's why we see, I think, so many anxious men. We see a lot of men who go towards addictions, whether that is alcohol, drugs, pornography. Like people are
Yeah,
looking for, not necessarily looking for something, but they just don't have the skill set within them, which is, something we actually have to develop, just like, like our structure physically. We have to develop parts of our brain to
very much.
work optimally. And if we're not teaching our kids, and we're not educating ourselves to be examples, mentors, etc., then it only makes sense that we will continue to develop underdeveloped emotional individuals.
I I couldn't agree more. I you know, I think of myself when I was 27, my father passed away, and my wife at that time, I was having, I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a word for what I was feeling. And she
Mm,
said, "Oh, that's grief." And I went, "Oh, okay." Because I had never learned a feeling vocabulary.
yeah,
I had feelings, but I never learned a vocabulary that I could express them. And so they had a lot of control over my life. We men are, we're very emotional creatures, very
yes,
emotional. But we don't understand our feelings because we haven't been encouraged to label them, identify them. Oh, that's what that is. Now I get it. And when I do this, hopefully that happens. My hope, to go back, one of my deepest hopes, and is that we will change the way we educate. That the emotional process will become as important as the intellectual process.
oh, it's so valuable. I think just as when you grow up, especially into man, you get married, you have kids,
Mm.
the way that your emotions come up for you and how they are exhibited changes drastically.
Oh,
There are movies and shows I cannot watch now as a father that I would have had no problem watching before that.
yeah.
And like, not a whole lot has changed, but it just goes to show that feeling vocabulary, that emotional range is so interesting. Because if you were to
Mm.
ask 100 people a few typical emotions associated with men, you probably come up with like a more red emotions, like anger and
Yeah,
rage and
yeah,
stuff like this. But like, it's such an unbelievable vast array of emotions that we can experience.
yeah.
And if you can't put a word to something, to a feeling that you're coming up with, you're probably going to struggle to understand it or throw it into the same narrow category.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Simon. The word feeling comes from the Latin word file, and it means to understand.
Mm.
So if I say that's a feeling, it means I understand something
Yeah.
about myself, what I'm experiencing. I thought that was interesting. Understand. Wow. A feeling. Yeah.
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 I think that is a really important thing. And I think that we in our culture, we do pretty well at understanding things outside of us. Like, we use, like, science to explain, like,
Oh, yeah.
gravity and light and
Yep.
sound and all these things. But when it comes to, let's say, like, mental health or things inside of our body, it's not super easy to make them explainable. That's why we have researchers and scientists and brain surgeons, who can actually go in and see these things. But to talk about, let's say, like, depression or anxiety, we don't have a strong understanding of something like that because it's inside of us, it's
It's
biochemical. I think we struggle a lot with that, and we just kind of like maybe push it to the side because we don't have that understanding.
No, we don't. One of the things that I did in my book because of that is that I have 11 illustrations of what happens in the brain and where in the brain emotional learning happens. How does the threat assessment happen? What gets triggered, if you will, the protective behavior. So I kind of lay it out graphically
Yeah.
so people have a sense that the brain is this learning, predicting, and adapting process. And it just wants you to be here tomorrow. It
Yeah.
doesn't care about your happiness. It's like, it's not a happifying process, it's a survivaling process. It
Mhm.
wants you to be alive tomorrow. That's its primary function. And so we can work with that evolutionary process. We can work with it or we can fight against it. The overcome, push away, battle your demons, fight your self-sabotage is a contradiction. It's a model that does not work because we're fighting evolution. We're not cooperating with evolution that wants us to survive. And the new memory reconsolidation process is about optimizing the brain's adapting and predicting process to change it, to change the brain at the synaptic level. That's the exciting part.
I love what you mentioned there about, we try to fight and battle our demons, in our past. And it makes me think, obviously the brain is so complex, and we barely understand anything about the brain in regards to its complexity, what it can do, its potential, how it functions. I think we're 1% into the potential of our learning of the brain.
Yeah.
But that one thing is for sure, that when you are in a state of fight or flight, in a sympathetic state, when angry, rageful, scared, fear, anxious. I think fear is a big point. Like, so many people are in a constant state of fear, and our biology is not designed to keep you in that state for long periods of time.
No.
You can't actually access hugely important intellectual, rational parts of your brain when you are functioning in such a stressful state. So going into battle against your demons, I don't think it's even possible to be able to do that, because the parts of your brain you need to fire, to wire, to reconnect and regrow and create new synaptic connections, which is a potential any second of the day. I don't think you can positively do that when you are in a state of anxiety and stress, and that's probably the beginning stages of that recovery process.
But you said it well, and that's why because prior to the turn of the century, during the whole 20th century, the predominant model of change or psychotherapy or coaching or self-help, and particularly starting in the 70s, was the counteractive model, because at that point in time, by neuroscience, it was very clear. Unconscious emotional learning is indelible. You cannot change. You got to have insight. You can have understanding. You can have soothing techniques when you're activated, but you can't change it.
Yeah.
The new neuroscience in this century has made it very clear. We can change the brain and the unconscious learning at the synaptic level. For me, learning that and learning what that process was, Simon, was a complete paradigm shift, as I mentioned. For me, it was like, it's like waking up and seeing, oh my God. But it allowed me to really look at my own criticisms and my own faults, and see them for what they were. My brain's just doing its protection thing, and I can change it. There was great freedom in that, but also I could see suffering differently, because suffering then became protection. It's a very different way to look at things, and that's why my profession, the psychotherapy profession, is very much challenged by this, because it is such a shift from how we've been functioning and helping people.
Yeah, it's not enough to know these days. We need to know how, and there's certainly very incredible formulas out there. There are ways in which to do that can, I believe, communicate to all sorts of different people. The way that I want to say, evolved my emotional learning and understanding would probably be very different to my wife's.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact, because I've tried to get her to read the books that I've read to change my life, and she's got her own path, which is awesome and great and wonderful. But we've got so many incredible people out there who do offer these, I don't want to say, solutions, I guess, to improving yourself and to becoming an individual that is, I want to say, more aware, living in a rest and digest state, less stressed environment. And I think the only way that your body and your brain can thrive and be prosperous is when you're in that state more often than not, because that's how we've evolved to be as a human being. And our biology is not so different from, hundreds of thousands of years ago human beings, but our environment, our culture is very, very vastly different. We don't have to worry too much about being eaten by saber-toothed tigers anymore, but we are unbelievably stressed out before we go to sleep, thinking about money and thinking about our kids and thinking about this and that. And some of these things are absolutely real, but we do have mechanisms in place to be able to help our brain through those moments, to sometimes even think or breathe, or move our way into a different brain shape. And these tools are available. We just have to kind of get out of our own way and be willing enough to learn them.
I appreciate your comment about the different levels, emotionally and then intellectually. About a month ago, I did some research on it and looking at the 3 dimensions of humanness in terms of how we express ourselves. The first was our technology, in both medical. Our technology, if you go back 250 years, we had the tire, then the printing press, the wheel, then the printing. But now the curve is exponential in terms of our cognitive development as measured by our technology. It's amazing. But if we look at our emotional development, and you just inferred that, we have not evolved at all in 250,000 years as a species. We still are tribal. We're very primitive in our behavior. We still are highly emotional creatures driven by emotion, i.e., look what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
It's all, so we're still very primitive as emotional creatures. And of course, that relates also to the spiritual dimension too. And that keeps evolving. But my observation is we've flatlined like this evolution emotionally, and we have this exponential curve technologically. And this has to catch up with that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we run the threat of destroying ourselves because of our emotional processes.
Yeah, I think a lot of the solution has got to do with kind of how we approach things here at Truehope in regards to taking a few steps back. Let's get back to the foundations of what we require. I love to think back about how we were 100,000 years ago. Like when it comes to my exposure to light, how I sleep, how I grow food, how I eat, how I move my body. Like we've all got all the signals in our natural world to understand these things. But again, like our cultural evolution has just boomed, where our human biology has not been able to keep up, and I don't think it ever will, unless we take a few steps back, look at the root cause of things, and be able to work with our traditions and get back to community. I think there's a huge spiritual deficiency on our culture. I see so many people looking to religion, looking to maybe a church or whatever that means for people, but there is a big gap in our soul, I'll just say, that people are looking to nourish, as well as looking to nourish their brains, their bodies. There's something outside of us that we might not necessarily energetically see, but I think we can all feel energetically something that we're all missing a little bit, whether that is community, people, church, I don't know, but people are looking for it. And again, there are options out there for people.
Oh yeah. And when people do that, oftentimes it's the sabotaging that holds them back.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't belong. I'm not sure people will like me. We have all these learnings that get in the way of our desires. In the book I talk about the foot on the gas and foot on the brake. We want to do something, express ourselves, do an exercise program, whatever, write a book, whatever it is, foot on the gas. But then when you start doing that, if the brain learned that this will cause pain and suffering, speaking in front of people, I can't do that because people will laugh at me. Yeah. You can rest assured you're going to be really anxious in that situation, because your your sympathetic nervous system has put the brake on. You got your foot on the gas and foot on the brake. That's really hard on the body.
Yeah.
The inflammatory system, just hard on us.
Yeah, and what that does to people, like in the long term, whether that is public speaking, which is kind of the classic example of immediate anxiety, where you feel that emotion just as quick as you think about public speaking, and that that reroutes into being that you think about that all the time. It's going to fire, it's going to wire, and it's going to be a norm, and you're not even going to be able to be in a state where you can actually maybe analyze those thoughts, analyze the validity of those thoughts. Are the things I'm actually concerned about, are they actually even real? I think that's a big conversation of the positivities of like things like CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy. But again, there's so many options out there for people. I'd love to ask you about more like the internal voice that people have, and people often describe that internal feeling voice that tells them not to speak up or not to trust or not to change. How does that
relationship not to
so I was just going to finish off the question there with, how does this voice form, and why does it feel so convincing even when it's outdated?
And that's one of the big dilemmas. It is outdated. And people say, well, I don't hear a voice, it's just a feeling. It's a feeling voice. It's telling you something. It's telling you, it's warning you. It's a warning signal. Don't do this. Stop. And that usually that's when we experience the anxiety. When that happens, your brain has perceived a stimulus, something you want to do or something that's happening out there. It's taking it in, and the brain's always doing a threat assessment of everything that comes in. My brain's doing a threat assessment right now as we have a conversation. And so that threat assessment looks at previous learnings or experiences that if it involves pain or suffering, the brain will immediately turn on anxiety to do that signal right there. And that signal will then produce the behavior. If I can become aware of that signal and give it words, in other words, what is the threat? You talked about it isn't real. The vast majority of our emotional threats have no basis in reality, Simon. They have no basis in reality. They are based on experiences in the past when our brain learned something that we didn't know it learned, therefore we don't know what it learned. But if I can bring that learning to consciousness, in other words, if I express myself, people will reject me just like kids bullied me when I was in grade school, or just like they laughed at me when I was in grade 7 and I made a mistake. So many examples in my book about that where, okay, this is happening now because it happened back then. If this, then this. And if I can articulate a conscious awareness of what that learning is, which we can do, then I can introduce what is called a prediction correction. Because the brain is an adaptive mechanism, one of its primary things to do is it's constantly wanting to learn to survive. It's okay, I get that. But if it encounters a mismatch of information, for example, if I'm I'm going to do a presentation, and I remember this early in my career very well. I'll do a presentation and I'm anxious, and oh my God, people are going to see that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm a fake, and I'm anxious, and I'm so worried they're going to see right through my soul. And so many people out there know what I'm talking about. Oh God. And it's like, now if I'm in that state and at the same time, I bring in information, kind of like Bluetooth, where you do you match them together. If I bring in information, no, wait a minute. Number one, I'm not in grade 7 anymore. But more importantly, I've done many presentations. I've talked to people many times, and they've appreciated it. They've acknowledged it. No one has laughed at me. No one has rejected me. They've all said, thank you. So if I mismatch, or called it prediction correction, If I know what the prediction is and I provide the brain with a mismatch while I'm in the negative state, and that's the important thing, you've got to be in the negative state. That's why affirmations don't work. You've got to be in that negative state. That consolidated neural network, which is actually located in the right subcortical regions of the right hemisphere, that's where the unconscious is. If I activate that and I feel it because I'm anxious, and I know if I do this, then this is what will happen. I'll be laughed at, rejected, criticized, shamed, ostracized, physically hurt, betrayed. There's 5 primary threats we experience as children. I'm in this anxious state, and then I bring in contradictory information. Wait a minute. The brain recognizes the mismatch. This is the most amazing thing. The brain recognizes the mismatch between what it's predicting and what's coming in, and it unwires that neural network that's back here, literally deconsolidates it. And when it deconsolidates it, it's open to be updated. And I can then bring in experiences. And after 5 hours, it reconsolidates back down with the new information. In other words, I have updated a learning. And now when that information comes in, I don't get triggered as much. And the more that you do it, that learning in fact, it's eliminated over time. Sometimes in one experience of that, it can be eliminated. That's the first time we can actually update our life, our history. We can eliminate self-sabotage by updating the learnings that cause it. What's the cause? We can update it. And that's what I'm just so excited about that. To me, I want people to realize, this is your brain just doing its brainy thing, and you can help it do better. Because you're not your brain. You're not your brain.
Yeah. Once we understand a little bit that, this brain, this amazing thing we have is super ancient. We still have parts of, the reptilian brain where, taking a risk meant life or death.
Right.
That's not quite the situation anymore, So once we kind of understand that a little bit, I think people, because of that, maybe don't take those risks, don't want to step into something that's unfamiliar or uncommon, or maybe even unconventional. Like that can be perceived as a risky thing to do. But honestly,
I think the history of True Hope shows that, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That's a history of taking steps, a courage against fear, moving forward, if you will. So absolutely. I totally am with you there. I think the hardest part, in my experience, and certainly myself personally, the hardest part of integrating this new way of thinking is it's so different than what I've learned. What I've learned is I've got to overcome and counteract and fight against, as opposed to in a kind of a mindful sense. Oh, this is what I'm experiencing. This is the threat of that feeling.
Yeah.
That threat has no basis in current reality, but it sure feels real.
It sure does.
Because it will feel real.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. It feels real because the emotional brain does not know time. Thinking brain knows time.
Absolutely. What differences do you observe when someone's brain is well supported biologically versus when it's under resourced?
Oh, that's a great question. Oftentimes, you will find, I have found individuals will get stuck in neurophysiological patterns, say, for example, depression, whether exogenous or they get stuck in a depressive state, hard to get out, and generalized anxiety states, not able to express themselves. And I was working with a client yesterday who is, because being under-resourced because she's in a constant state of threat in her anxiety level. She's lost 18 pounds for no reason at all, other than the fact that the stress is causing her, and it's a source of concern. There's no physiological reason for it.
Super common as well.
Or the other end, which is I'll eat a lot as a way to soothe myself, or I'll use alcohol or drug. I mean, our addictions primarily are protective mechanisms.
Yeah. And examples just like that might seem very different. You'd actually have probably, if you went a conventional route, you'd have a very different diagnosis. You'd have a very different health protocol, rather than, you can actually go back and look at those things and they have a very similar root cause, which is also very interesting. And you mentioned, we've got an unprecedented rise in anxiety, depression, ADHD, emotional dysregulation. From your vantage point, how much of this do you believe is linked to that chronic stress and chronic nutrient deficiencies that is affecting brain function?
We do a lot of people do a lot of things externally to take care of themselves. Stress management, but not a lot of things internally, and taking care of your brain in terms of how you eat, all of that is important. We all know that. We all recognize that. After we finish this, I'm going to go for my 3.5 mile walk, my aggressive, just because it's just important to do. But combining what I think is emotional work, deep emotional work. What are these feelings about? What is the threat that's contained in this? With good nutrition, exercise. I mean, it can be a very full and rich life in that way. And one not free of symptoms, but able to change and reduce what I call the emotional tyranny of the past. There's a tyrant in us, but it's actually a protector. It's a part that wants to protect us, but it gets in the way. And so it's kind of controlling our lives, even though it comes from way long time ago. I think there's so much research, as you know, in terms of levels of consciousness now that are happening, and how do we increase our level of consciousness beyond just survival to thriving in all its dimensions.
In my experience with like big change and the things and when people actually do that, it often comes down to, unfortunately, tragedy and trauma. When that comes into somebody's life, that's when consciousness and awareness is shattered for a lot of people, and actually gives them the capacity to think about significant change, whether that's death to a family member, an accident, something like that. That, unfortunately, it's something like that usually triggers things for people. And it's a shame that that's the route that it takes for a lot of people to kind of, like, let's say, wake up to the past behaviors that we have that aren't serving us in the future. It's a struggle.
Unfortunately, that we have to, the old saying, what is it, that you have to really hurt first before you get better, or you've got to hit bottom before you get up. A lot of phrases like that. I suggest it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
And I talk about a process called trigger-informed mindfulness. In other words, what triggers me out there with people at work? What triggers me so that I have a reaction? And it is out of anxiety. And if I can begin to track those and become aware of them, all of those, other than it's somebody physically threatening me with a gun to my head, all of those are threats of an emotional nature that have no basis typically in reality. But you made a comment, I want to come back to it. Physical pain and emotional pain or social pain are very close in the brain. The locations of that pain are very close. So oftentimes emotional pain can generate physical pain, and we feel it. Many people I've worked with, they not unusual to create somatic problems, which in fact are manifestations, as you know.
Oh, 100%.
Of an internal or intrapsychic issue that is causing a lot of stress.
Yeah, you can absolutely think yourself to
Oh,
disease, but
yeah.
you can also think yourself back to full health as well, without question.
I
The
agree.
body has got this remarkable arsenal, this pharmacy of chemicals in which it can do quite phenomenal things, but we have to obviously give it the right circumstances in order to access that. And that's the I don't want to say struggle, that's the challenge that we have, but we know it's available.
I appreciate what you're talking about there. One of the things that I talk about in the book is our brain has an emotional immunity to change. If that change involves pain and suffering with regard to the change we want to make. So the brain perceives a threat, just like our immune system perceives an organism. It perceives a threat and it turns on its protective mechanisms to fight that threat. And it also has a memory system. It remembers that pathogen. So that's why vaccines play such a role. So what happens is if it encounters that pathogen in the future, it just turns on the defense mechanism. Our brain does the same thing. If it encounters pain and suffering with regard to something we do or something we experience that we want to do different, we want to do something different. But if the brain learned doing that will involve pain and suffering, it turns on its own emotional immunity, which is anxiety, and then the self-sabotage mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
They function very similar. They both have this immunity. The brain's immunity, though, is very stifling. The other one is helps us thrive.
That's right. We before we jumped on air and we got together to do this podcast, I recommended that you should check out the latest documentary on Truehope. It's called Epiphany: The Truehope Battle. It's a documentary that's available on our website. I'll leave a link in the show notes. But I'd love to get your feedback on that. Truehope. We're a company. There's a few elevator pitches I give to people, but essentially what we're trying to do is to provide people the necessary nutrition they need to thrive. And the reason we do this every day is because we don't want other families to suffer like the Stephan family suffered. And that epiphany was a gift from God, in the words of Anthony Stephan, the founder. And it's our job and our role here to get this product into the brains and bodies of people who are struggling. So I'd love to just, what did you think about the movie? And, what does it make you think when it comes to nutrition, nourishing the brain, helping people get into, let's say, a safer brain space in order to make those changes, and how that connects with your work?
Well, first of all, I found that my experience, it was very moving and inspiring. And it took a lot of courage to do that, to confront. It's Canada Health Canada. What is it called?
Yeah, you got it. Health Canada. Yeah.
Health that was really amazing. It was almost like, wow, boy, I can get it. Where I could go in a lot more details, but I could get where it took a lot of belief, trust, openness, and courage. The thing that's interesting is you're asking an industry to make a paradigm shift in how they think about healing. And we both know that paradigm shifts take a long time to happen.
Yeah.
Because there is so much vested in the old paradigm. I see it in my work. This is a new paradigm, this way of dealing with issues, problems. And what y'all are doing is the same thing. So I oftentimes think, it takes 1 or 2 generations to make a paradigm shift. Maybe not now. It used to because of the internet, but now it can be faster. But I couldn't agree more that the epidemic of depression and anxiety in our country is a function both of an emotional process and a neurophysiological process, both of which, I it was very interesting. Because my daughter suffers from depression, and I said, honey, you need to see this. You need to see this. This really resonates, and it's something to consider rather than the other stuff that you take.
Yep.
And I thought that was, she hasn't done it yet, but I keep encouraging her to do so.
Yeah, it can be tricky for people. I think what we've spoken about today in regards to the brain and the body's resistance to change, because people are in a fight or flight mode a lot of the time, and that's being triggered by patterns of the past.
Yep.
It's very challenging to step into the alternative to that when you're undernourished. Like, your body your body is stressed when it's undernourished. So therefore it's challenging to be in a place where you can think about making big, significant changes. And without question, the connection between emotional dysregulation, you could call that emotional deficiency, and emotions, these biochemicals that they're made up of something. There are building blocks that are necessary to be absorbed, to be able to make those, to get them to function. And if you are undernourished, you're not going to be able to manufacture these neurotransmitters, these hormones that we absolutely rely on for thousands of functions every second of the day.
Amen to that. And I would add, Simon, your body's energy budget gets depleted.
Capacity. Yeah.
It really gets depleted. And as a result, I work with many, they're tired at the end of the day. Well, they're working so hard. And I don't think there's enough nourishment, both particularly neurologically, for us to really learn. And there's a lot that's going on in research in that, as you know. But boy, oh boy, when we get depleted, the last thing we need is alcohol or drugs or something that is manufactured, or an energy drink. No, that's not a good idea. It pumps you up, but it depletes your energy budget, and you can become dependent. Your body become dependent on that stuff.
Yeah, you'll never convince me that your depression is a Zoloft Prozac deficiency. And that's how we treat it in the drug model. You can maybe convince yourself of that, perhaps. And I understand people get in desperate situations, and they should be able to go to their doctor and get support and therapeutic solutions. But the ones we have on offer right now aren't the answer. No. And we spoke about paradigm shifts and how long that takes. Just like my brain, just like my family, just like the pharmaceutical industry, they're all organisms, that live and breathe. And they take time to evolve, they take time to adjust, they risk assess. And a natural health product that is literally just food, that can't be patented, that can't be made into a $1 billion product, is a risk to an industry that relies its bread and butter on these drugs I just mentioned, Zoloft, Prozac, all these things. And it's a scary idea to Health Canada, to pharmaceutical industries, that this could be let's just say a competitor. And it takes a lot of paradigm shift within these organizations and organisms.
It's definitely a threat. Just as I think this paradigm shift in neuroscience and change is a threat, becomes, we have to adapt now differently. And boy, as much as there's resistance to change, it's because we don't know how to cooperate. And I think we're learning how to cooperate to help change happen. So what we call resistance is really the brain's the threat to what would be the raison d'etre if all of a sudden people could heal themselves with natural nutraceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals.
And I've had this conversation literally thousands of times, but
Yeah.
Most people recognize that our soil and our food doesn't carry the nutrient profile in which it used to have. Therefore, I don't think you can eat well enough to get the nutrition your body requires on a day-to-day basis. And then you throw in the stress of just living in 2026. That capacity that you have, that glass of energy just gets more and more depleted. And it makes sense that people are just like done and they've got nothing left,
Right.
that they would go to a behavior like junk food, or
Yes.
watching a show for 5 hours and binge watching things, to just like step out of the reality that you've just got this depletion. I understand those behaviors, but
Sure.
it's important to know that there are solutions out there for you. And, especially here at Truehope, we're happy to have phone conversations, by email or whatever, to kind of help people, guide them on their way. Because we've worked with over 500,000 people coming off medications and, living a wonderful, fruitful life. And for a lot of people, we're their last hope, because a life on 4, 5 plus medications isn't really a life at all for a lot of people, and they want something different. They want a solution.
I will tell you, Simon, I have worked with so many people that have been 3, 5 medications. It's just, it's kind of zombie. It's really hard,
Yeah, most of those medications are there to take care of the side effects of the other medications, and it's like,
right.
Yeah, and it's a baffling system that is unfortunately our norm. But I will, to my dying breath, be a voice for the alternative. I'd love to just finish off with a question on integrating everything we've spoken about, and hope. So if someone's feeling stuck despite therapy, insight, effort, what would you want them to understand about their brain, their body, and the possibility of real change?
Great question. So if I feel stuck, it means there's something I want to do and there's something in my way. That's the stuckness, So when any of us feel stuck in something, I suggest, not always, but I suggest it's because the brain is predicting that if I get unstuck, I am going to suffer. I don't know that consciously. I just kind of feel it, and I'll be damned if I do and damned if I don't. So I end up being stuck. But there's something I want to do. The first thing is to identify, what is it I want different for myself? Do I want to follow an exercise plan? Do I want to be able to do public speaking? Do I want to get into an intimate relationship and get closer to a partner? Do I want to be calmer as a father and more present to my children and my wife? What is it? What's the positive difference? Get in touch with the positive difference. Imagine doing it. Notice what happens in your body. What would I do if I was unstuck? And that's a challenge for many of us, because we think about, well, I wouldn't be unhappy. We think in the negative, not the absence of a negative, which is not a positive. Mm-hmm. To identify, what is the positive difference first? Secondly, imagine doing it and you're going to become anxious. Your body is that's guaranteed. You're going to feel distress, tight chest, tight gut, whatever it is, whatever your somatic markers are. Let yourself feel it. And then recognize the brain is doing this because the thing that I want to do for the brain, for the emotional brain, involves pain and suffering based on something I learned a long time ago. What is the threat? And then actually to write it out. Actually write out, if I do this, if I am unstuck, if I work with many people who had depressive symptoms. If I'm depressed, then I will be more expressive and more happy. And I asked a member person, I said, well, what happens if you do that? Take a look at all your friends and your family. And she said, oh my God, my family won't like me. I said, they won't like you? She says, yeah, because in my family, everything's very negative. Yeah. There's a lot of depression. And if I am happy and feeling good, I won't belong anymore. Can you imagine that? But that was her truth. And we had to then you create prediction corrections. And you introduce the correction to the brain when you're in the negative state. That opens up that network, and then you can continue to feed positive to your brain. It will reconsolidate back down, and you will gradually see and sometimes totally eliminate the anxiety that goes with that behavior. I've seen it hundreds of times in my own life. It's a different way of thinking. It means you don't push away the stuff. You go underneath and really articulate, if this, then this. But wait a minute. And the book is full of stories and examples of all kinds of stories and examples to illustrate. There's what I call a 5-step human technology to transform yourself, to eliminate the self-sabotage, to eliminate it. And the neuroscience is there. The science is very clear, just like it's clear on what the importance of good nutrition. It's all there. Yeah. There's nothing new. It just has to be embraced.
Beautiful. Well said, Brian. Where is the best place for people to connect with you and learn more?
Brian DesRoches, DesRoches.com. The book is on Amazon or at your local bookstore. You can order it. It's in digital and print format. Those are the best places to do. I don't do a lot of social media because I don't do a lot of social media. Too busy with other things.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, absolutely. It's not for everyone. That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, honestly, thank you so much for coming on the show. Such a great topic. I think the more conversations we can have about this and providing people the options that there are available in which to enrich themselves and recognize that, a big thing we're talking about here at Truehope is, you're not broken. You're not broken out there. You're just deficient.
You're not broken. You're not broken. No. You learn some things that don't apply anymore, and therefore we make mistakes.
Yeah.
Brain does behaviors to protect us. We're not broken. Yeah. We're not broken. No. Not
I completely agree.
You say that. I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much again, Brian, for coming on the show. There's a few other things I'd love to talk to you about in the future, so I'm hoping you'll come back on again.
You bet. Be pleased to, Simon. Thank you so much. Many blessings to you and in the work that you're doing. I just really appreciate it and respect it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brian. Well, that is it for this episode of Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. Check out the show notes to connect with Brian to learn more. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll see you soon.